Yeah, we got two walking in the door. All right, clerk, call the roll. There's the quorum.
Senator Albritton, Senator Butler, Senator Chastain, Senator Figures, Senator Gavan, Senator Gudger, Senator Hatcher, Senator Hovey, Senator Melson, Senator Roberts, Senator Sessions, Senator Singleton, Senator Smitherman, Senator Wagner, Senator Allen, Senator Orr.
Here. All right, we got 10 members here. We do have a quorum. And at this time, we've already had the public hearing on this bill. I'm going to invite to the microphone the governor's policy advisor, Mr. Nick Moore, to explain the difference between the introduced version and the House engrossed version that was passed last week by the House. What changes did they make, Mr. Moore? And then if you want to walk through the bill generally again for the committee, that's fine too.
There we go. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. There were 12 distinct amendments made in the CHOOSE Act substitute as engrossed HB 129, and you could group those into three categories. The first being academic accountability and transparency. The first was a technical amendment on accreditation. The bill as introduced listed as one of the accreditors Advanced Ed. They have subsequently changed their name to Cognia. It also adds the Alabama Independent Schools Association and the Alabama Christian Education Association as two additional accreditors. The second change in the academic accountability transparency domain is around testing transparency and reporting to the Department of Revenue. This amendment would require participating schools to send summary level scores to the Department of Revenue, and it would also require those data to be provided to participating families at their request. The second category is related to ensuring that the program protects certain preference students that, as part of the discussion, the bodies wanted to make sure that, particularly in the first two program years, that we were focused on. And one of those that came actually from discussions with this body was to preference military dependents that were zoned for a priority school. So that would be a school that the Accountability Act defines a D or F school per your changes to that last year, Senator Chastain. Secondly, this closes a potential loophole that would have inadvertently allowed a student that was enrolled in any school to claim the $2,000 amount that was reserved for homeschoolers. So what this would do is to say, if you're not a bona fide homeschooler, that you cannot claim that $2,000. Also, it would clarify that in order to participate, that you would need to be lawfully present in the United States. Another technical change was to ensure that the participating schools are schools that are located in the state of Alabama, and if they're online, that they have a nexus of activity or arrangement with an Alabama school. We're also protecting participation in athletics, and that was an amendment added on the floor to make sure that the eligibility of a student to participate in school athletics is not interrupted by participation in the program. The third bucket of changes would be around fiscal accountability. The first creates a market-driven growth option for the program. So what that would do is to say, in order for the legislature to contemplate increasing the level of funds that are appropriated annually to the CHOOSE Act fund, program funds in the previous year would have to be utilized at least 90%. Also, related to that, another technical change states that no more than $500 million can be carried over year to year in the CHOOSE Act fund. Another technical amendment, the third in this category, provides for the periodic payment of funds to participating schools. This is designed to avoid the circumstance of a student enrolling in a participating school and then perhaps terminating their participation in the school and then setting up the need to try to recapture those funds. So if funds are paid out in a quarterly or monthly basis, then you won't run into that circumstance. Costs, non-discrimination, fourth technical change in the fiscal category would ensure that a participating student is not charged more by a participating school than a non-participating student. And finally, this would hold participating students harmless in the event of proration. And those are all 12 of the technical amendments, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, any questions of Mr. Moore, Senator Singleton?
Yes. I want to go back to one of your first ones that you mentioned about on the testing and that the information being given to the Department of Revenue and then the parents. Would that ever be posted to the public, or is just between Department of Revenue and those parents?
The bill does not speak to it being reported publicly, and so that would be made available to the parent upon request.
So we would never know whether they're failing or not over there.
The parent and the family would.
Oh, but everybody in public school get to know that they're failing. Gotcha.
Any other questions of Mr. Moore, Senator Smitherman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What about the, I came in and you was in the middle of making this, sharing with us. What about the the testing? I think that was a big issue when we were upstairs with this bill. It may have been the Senate version, but we was upstairs with this bill. And that was the issue. I think it was the Board of Education, maybe the superintendents as well, was concerned about two sets of standards for evaluation of performance. How we've developed a unified standard for evaluation now that both sets of schools or whatever are going to have to meet, or where are we on that issue?
The substitute didn't make any change to the underlying way that it was established in the bill as introduced, to where a school would choose an assessment that's aligned to their curricula, or a norm referenced achievement assessment, or an aptitude assessment. So what that's doing is aligning the assessment to the curricula they're learning.
But that's not what. That's okay. I understand.
Yeah. So
I understand the answer and the way you're giving it, but in essence, we're saying that it's two sets of standards, all 3 or 4 or 5. That we're giving the state money for education, but our measurement of performance is not the same, and that is a serious concern. Because it looks like it's what the senator was saying. It looks like to me that we are putting burdens on public education, and we let non-public education ride like they want to ride. I mean, so that's a serious concern. And Mr. Chairman, I will say this: I think it would have been helpful if at least we had known one day ahead of time that we will have this meeting. I mean, several of us may have had some amendments that at least we would like to offer for consideration. And yet on a Tuesday, we recess and come and meet. There's no way to, I would have known that we had this meeting. So I would hope that it's understood that we need to get some additional amendments on here. And I don't mean go out on the floor and just for the sake of presenting them and they just flat out voted down because we're not going to take them. I mean, it's some things that have been brought out that we need to do about this particular bill. And I want to say to everybody in here, too, that it's some things that we got to do before we leave here about this budget, because it is totally unfair to public kids in public education that we don't put the same identical amount of money and we don't hold everybody to the same standard. This is public money. We're taking public money that go to public schools, and we're giving to private entities for the sake of saying we got choice, but we ain't taking care of the house. We're not taking care of these kids in public schools. So I mean, seriously, y'all, we come up with all these programs, and they're great, but it's just like if you're a mayor of a city, it's nice to come up with all these creative programs, but if you ain't taking care of street and sanitation, We ain't taking care of police, EMA, and fire. If you're not taking care of that, all them other things don't mean a whole lot. And that's what we've been doing, y'all. We've been doing all them other things that I was just talking about. And we ain't taking care of these basic things. That's these kids down here. So, I mean, I hope that we do that. I'm not against what you're trying to do. I'm just, my concern you're doing it on the backs of public kids, even with this testing. So I'm serious, y'all. I hope that we get this thing straight, because we ain't had no opportunity to get it straight. This ain't an opportunity when we don't even know that it's coming up. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Melson. Senator Singleton, and
First before me.
okay, Senator Hatcher.
Mr. Moore, quick question. I'm looking at this and I'm trying to determine, and based on what I'm hearing even from Senator Singleton and Senator Smitherman, I hear all the rhetoric around ESAs. Do you have any sort of data regarding outcomes?
There's data from Florida, Wisconsin, several states that are participating that show that students that are participating, particularly students that have special needs, have participated above their peers. And I would also say that it's not the stated intent of this goal to directly increase standardized test scores. This is meant to empower parents to put their child in the best setting that allows them to thrive. And also on assessment.
No, but I think you just, because what I'm interested in is actual outcomes.
Right.
And you said in places like Wisconsin.
Wisconsin and Florida, there are many quasi-empirical studies that have been done that show the efficacy of empowering families to put their student in a setting that meets their needs.
Okay, so the follow-up, I guess, to that question would be, because I think these have started, what, in 2021, Arizona was doing this. What is the outcome there?
They started in 2022 as a fully universal program, but before that, there have been more limited choice programs and ESA programs that started out with students with disabilities and other, for example, like our AAA program. And so there have been longer amounts of time to study the results of those programs.
So what I'm seeing is, just looking at our state, I think we're talking about how many school-age children we have, about 700,000 or something like that.
If you count public and non-public students, there's over 800,000, but there's about 726,000 public K-12 students.
So what have your stats told you about the average cost of private education in the state of Alabama?
On the high end, it could be anywhere above 20,000. On the low end, it's 4,000. The state average is about 8,500.
So the average is about, what you say?
About 8,500.
And this bill is offering what, 7,000?
7,000. And we hope there'll be a new supply of schools that are created that will likely peg their rate of tuition at close to the value of the program.
So the estimate then, out of those 746,000, what is it saying to you about the number of private school students?
Well, there's about 75,000 private school students estimated in the state.
Okay. And then finally, I think maybe this is a question for you, Mr. Chair, is, I may have missed this part. This account would be funded by what exactly?
It's funded at the Department of Revenue. The first year, you'll see it in the supplemental that Governor Ivey sent over $50 million, which is, I'll call it an advance payment. I think the governor's office is thinking a similar act next year, since the bill, if I'm correct, would start up August of 25. Is that right, Mr. Moore?
Yes, sir.
That class, that cohort. And then the funding would be handled by the Department of Revenue, where they disperse the funds to a school that has the children enrolled or the homeschool parent with receipts of eligible expenses. It gets complicated. I look at LFO over there, but it is similar to a tax credit, but the family never receives it in hand, or it receives it as a check to themselves. It's all housed in the Department of Revenue. And that's the reason it had to be a House bill. Senator Singleton.
Yes, I want to go, while we're on homeschool, that's one of the clarifications I want to get, is that how do we know that it is a certifiable homeschool program? If we're just taking the parents' word that they're homeschooling their children, or are they a part of an association or something that they sign up with in the state?
Mr. Moore.
So one, revenue, if it's the curricula and things like that, they'll be procuring. If it's a homeschool vendor that provides curricula to them, they'll have to register as a vendor and get in the stars just like everybody else. As far as the enrollment verification, we're not adding or changing any of the regulation on the way that a homeschooler participates. They either participate through a private tutor or through a private school or a religious school that's as defined in the code.
Okay, and in the second one, I want to go back to, on page 7, subsection H, dealing with special needs students. I hope that I'm reading this wrong, that a participating student who's a special needs student remains eligible to receive special education or similar services from the resident school district as provided by federal state law. Explain that to me. I hope that my interpretation in my mind is different from what I want to hear from you.
That's language essentially saying that we're going to maintain the status quo under federal law, and that provides for 3 distinct situations with a student that has been identified for special ed, and it all depends on whether their parent chooses to enroll them in a private setting. And if they chose to participate in the CHOOSE program and voluntarily went from a public school to a private school, then that waives their right to a free and appropriate public education. And then at that time, the public school, the district school, would still be required, as they are under IDEA, to work and collaborate with that parent as resources allow to provide services as is available. So it's just basically maintaining the current regime under federal law.
So let me understand this. So if a child goes over to a private school, so that public school still has to service them?
If that, just in the same 3 cases as under current law, if that student has an IEP, they've already been identified, and then that parent chooses to go and waive FAPE and go into a private setting, or if they've not been identified, the child find process helps them to be identified for services. Then the third case, which wouldn't apply here, is that if the school district chooses to place them in special ed. So it all just depends on the placement, who places them, and whether they've already been identified for services.
So under some circumstances, that child could be in a private school being serviced by a public school, and this public school would not get any money for that child.
And that's the same way that could happen today, and it wouldn't change anything under those circumstances, as is the case under current law. If a student today were to move from a public school into a private school, that would be the case there as well.
Senator Smitherman.
So the private school is going to receive the public money, but they're not going to be responsible for any of those things that you just said. We're going to ask the public school to provide a 50, what is it called, 504, 503?
504.
504. And the 504 can consist of them having to have an individual person that's there with them in the class. They have to pay that salary, and they're going to provide for any other of those, lack of a better word, tutorial assistance or whatever. And this public school that's getting less money right now per student is going to have to pay for those services. And yet, like he said, this school over here is going to get the $7,000, and they're not going to be responsible for that. And is that what y'all going to pass?
But the average,
I just got to ask everybody, is that what y'all going to pass? I mean, at the point blank, I just have to ask the question, is this what my colleagues are going to do to public schools? Thank you.
I think you answered the question that that could happen now without this bill, that a child goes to a private school and the public school would still be responsible. Did I miss that, or did I misinterpret that?
based on whatever the confluence of federal law is. And so there is a different treatment of public and private schools under IDEA. And so based on that child's placement, whether that's by their parent or by the district, and whether they've been identified before they went into the private setting or not. And if they went into the school with an IEP, then, and they waived their access to free and appropriate public education, that reduces the amount of resources that the public school has to provide. But bottom line is that we're not changing the treatment of special education law through this bill, and students with profound physical exceptionalities and other needs, may not choose to use this bill, and it's not designed to be a special education bill.
But Mr. Chairman, with all due respect, today, the public school would have gotten that money, even though that child leaves. Right now, what we're talking about is the money going over there and then the public school not being able to have the money. Is that a difference?
Well, the average per pupil spending in the state, when you add up state, local, and federal funds, approaches $12,000 per student. And with, for example, federal Title I funds, those are funded based on the number of students in poverty in that district's geographic boundary, not on their actual per student count. So although our foundation program is based off of the average daily attendance, local and state funding actually be held completely harmless under this bill.
Still,
Senator Smithman.
but however, I hear you say the average, but these poor systems who don't have enough millage and funds already to do what they're doing, we're putting this burden on them, is what you just said, and this body. Let me just stop you there. I understand what you said about what the law says now. I can just tell you, in fact, that there are charter schools that are not doing it, okay? I mean, I just know that. I don't, okay? But now, this body, you all are here asking this body, under the same circumstances, for us to give $7,000 a student, and none of that money goes over there to help that system I just talked about with that kind of student. That's the problem that I have. Is that this body's getting ready to give y'all in excess of I don't know how much, because I heard you say that y'all want to at least have an opportunity to carry over $500 million, and if that's the case, it got to be way more than 500. You're going to carry over $500 million. So we're talking about at a minimum $500 million or more, and we're not going to give them a dime, and we're going to make them be responsible. I don't understand how we're trying to do that. That's what you all ask us to do. And I don't understand why you all wouldn't resume or assume the responsibility for that student if that student moves over there, no matter what condition they're in. You understand what I'm saying? Whether it's like that or not, is that y'all got a problem with that?
Well, working with you, the governor's nearly doubled the foundation program and her administration.
I know I'm cutting you off. I apologize, but that ain't what I asked you. I asked you, do y'all have a problem with that? Now, you could, if you do, say you do. If you don't, say you don't. I mean, I just would like a clear answer on my question. Do you?
I don't understand the question.
Do you have a problem with assuming responsibility for those students that need those 504(3)? Mm-hmm. All right. If we're giving y'all $7,000 to do what you want to do with, then you all had a problem with if you taking a student, you take the whole student, because we can't, if the student's got to come back, we ain't gonna get the money back over there. So if you're gonna take the money, I'm asking y'all to take the whole student and be responsible for the student. Can y'all do that?
Yeah, I would say that the answer to your question is no, we don't have a problem with that, because we're not changing the treatment of the student vis-a-vis special ed law. So if that, regardless of how that student's private school access was funded, the way in which they are treated with special ed law under this bill does not change that interaction.
But would you all have a problem with that, whatever that cost come out of that $7,000? Y'all got a problem with that? I mean, because we telling them to take it out of that, whatever little money they get, and they ain't gonna get this money, because the money's going and the student is gone. But we telling them to pay it out of. It's just like we got 100 students, mm-hmm. and you all take 10. So the foundation is gonna give them the money for 90. But they responsible for that 10 and the 90, getting $90, 90 students worth of foundation money. But those 10 that went over there, if they special need, they got to take care of them too. And they ain't getting another dime past the 90 students. That's what I'm talking to my colleagues about too. I'm talking to them and you too. It's saying ain't nothing right about that.
Well, I see where you're,
Yeah, you see what I'm
no, I see what you're saying,
Ain't
but
nothing right about that.
those are three separate issues that we have to address separately.
But it's all wrapped up in this money. And that's what it wrapped up in.
Well, I think it's coming up as a result of this discussion, but the underlying issue that special education law is perpetually underfunded due to federal law that creates an unfunded mandate, that goes beyond this bill.
And that wasn't the issue that I was saying. And the reason I'm saying this, even to Chairman, these kind of things we could address with 1 day notice to have some solutions to this to be considered. But with this short notice, I mean, we haven't had an opportunity yet to address this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. All right, Senator Hatcher, and we're going to wind it up here. All right.
Almost I'm done here. But I think Senator Smitherman raises a very valid question. And the question is, we know that the numbers in this state and really throughout the country is really exponential in terms of individuals requiring special education needs. That 504 is exploding. And the fact that, and I see this kind of as a notion of double dipping, if in fact we are saying, because what you've communicated is there's a target group, at least, and I don't want to really use that term, of individuals you would like to, this program to be an opportunity for those individuals. You all come up with these nice little expressions, creating hope and opportunity for our students. So the idea is that if in fact you have a child requiring special education needs, needing the services for kids who are working with behavioral challenges, learning disorders, all these things, what I'm hearing you say is that these resources will not be a part if that child goes into a private, because most private schools, if not all of them, do not have the capacity for this. They normally contract that work out. Pretty much all of the schools I've worked in that are private, they contract that out. They don't have those departments. So what we are saying is that the public schools who do have the infrastructure for that, right, that those schools would still be responsible, would be, and use the term, the option for the parent, and most parents want their kids, a parent who would adopt this program, who would seek this program, is a parent who wants to see their child have more of an opportunity, right? So the idea would be they would want to have their child, go through whatever is necessary to help that child to be successful. The $7,000, which is, by the way, based on the numbers you mentioned to me, is a drop in the bucket for most of our schools. That would be that target. So if the average in the state of Alabama is $8,000 plus, and this is $7,000, then we got to deal with the fact that there's money still left in this pool. But the idea that you're going to take those schools, public education, utilize those services, which are not free, and at the same time, we are providing this money, tells me that there is, look, as the elders used to say in my tradition, Mr. Chairman, if it don't come out in the wash, it's coming out in the rinse. And at some point, this is going to be a significant issue in a state that, as I recall, prior to the last 2 or 3 years, we always had problems with the education budget, always. But now that we have these resources, and we have what, maybe, that number of students in the state of Alabama, 700 and some thousand, but 80,000+ who in private education. I'll say again for the people listening, because I got accused of this last year, my parents did send me to private school. They paid for it. They paid for that. And the only reason they did it was not because they don't believe in public education. They didn't want Kirk, who first of all had to contract his fights out, because, the fact of the matter is that when, I was not getting into those, but it wasn't just that. The school was in the neighborhood. I could walk to it. So the idea was that, I'm just concerned about the very things that are being raised. How are we going to support this kind of thing? Because as you've said before, we may have these resources now in the state, but, who knows what's coming? And what I've noticed with you is a lot of fiscal responsibility, which I absolutely embrace. How are we doing that? And finally, I've said again, I'm concerned that if you want to decapitate public education, at least say it, so we'll know how to deal with that. But these ideas that somehow we come up with, say, okay, well, look, this will help public schools. This is going to help public schools to be more competitive. That may be true, but here's what I do know. I do know that money may not be the panacea to the issues, but I know what happens when you don't have it. And the quality of that education is going to be dismal if we don't put it where it needs to be among the individuals we say we really want to serve, and not create some sort of subsidy for individuals who, for the most part, may not be able to afford private education, but want to use the state resources to fund that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, it's been moved. Is there a second? Second? All right, seeing no other discussion, clerk, call the roll.
Senator Albritton, Senator Butler, Senator Chastain, Senator Figures, Senator Gavan, Senator Gudger, Senator Hatcher, Senator Hovey, Senator Melson, Senator Roberts, Senator Sessions, Senator Singleton, Senator Smitherman, Senator Wagner, Senator Allen,
10 ayes, 3 nays. The bill is given a favorable report. Thank you, members. We
Mr.
are
Chairman, will you be willing to entertain amendments on the floor when it comes to the floor?
Yeah, I would expect
Thank you,
to have
sir.
some. I know in the House they had them as well.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.